Hello, everybody. Welcome to this third podcast, which we have today live with Urtzi Cristobal. Welcome, Urtzi. So he's an outstanding individual who's been working, over a decade in palliative care in the hospice movement, is a great trainer and teacher, and certainly in my own life, a great friend, and also a remarkable being who's been helping very much to focus and center our efforts to get together people that are really in the field of groundbreaking work with complementary healthcare. And I'm not sure if you are on now that I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No, I can't hear you yet. Okay.
The colors are faded. This was even an older emotion.
And now I've got something in the background working here that's not supposed to be on, which is a lecture that I've been listening to before. I better turn that off. There we go. And we're having a few technical problems here with getting Urtzi on the call. Can you try to? Now I can hear you. Yes, welcome. And we had some Spanish just in the background coming in. Talking about the latest technologies to discover holographic pictures of discovering illness in blood before it even manifests in the cellular body. So I cut that out, and we're waiting now for another remarkable individual called Dr. Thomas Lodi, who is actually calling in from Thailand, Phuket, where he's got one of his palliative clinics where he's working as an integrative oncologist. He's working in 3 clinics, actually, one in Phoenix, Arizona, where he shares some of his time in the Oasis of Healing, and Bangkok and the Phuket place, where he's also very active. And he's on many boards of medical associations in many fields. He's been working over 30 years now in the work with oncology, and also in internal medicine, in psychology, leading large institutions, and also been training. And I'm waiting to introduce Urtzi and Dr. Thomas Lodi to each other. And Urtzi will be hosting really this call. I'm just there really to facilitate and start this meeting, and still waiting for Dr. Thomas Lodi to come on. Urtzi, would you like just take this opportunity and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, yes, so we know who we're dealing with?
Yes, I can do. So thank you for the introduction, Hans. And yes, it's an enormous privilege for me to be here. Yes, so basically, I'm a psychotherapist. I have worked in the world of palliative care for over a decade. I worked for a hospice where I started working as a counselor, working with patients, relatives, family members, did a lot of bereavement work as well. And I've done a lot of training for nurses, doctors, healthcare professionals, and so on. And then I ended up sort of managing 3 different departments, basically, managing the counselling support team, as well as spiritual care and information and guidance. And so I left that work officially sort of 6 months ago. I'm still sort of linked to the palliative care world. I still supervise counselling services in hospices, but I thought it was time to get out the more sort of conventional medicine and try and do something different, really. I also teach at the Gestalt Center in London, and I've got my private practice, as well as teaching and supervising in palliative care.
Thank you so much, Urtzi. I've just contacted Thomas Lodi to see if he has got our Zoom link. I'm really curious, and I can't wait for your questions, because having prepared this with you beforehand, I know that you're going to dive deeply into some questions that are very crucial for people, because we know in the cancer field, cancer being such a, almost like become a swear word or the death sentence, when people deal really with such a, on some level, what they believe fatal illness. We're going to be really curious with Dr. Lodi having been capable of, with his complementary approaches to medicine and dealing with people as individuals, as people had a biography that led to their state where they are now, where this imbalance in the body has been caused, where cancer, who all of us have cancerous cells, all of us have cells that are mutating. If our system is balanced, if our immune system is working efficiently, it's kept at check. It's when this imbalance comes in for some sort of reasons that might be traumatic, they might be emotionally caused, they might be environmentally caused, there might be belief systems. There might be many reasons that I hope to find out more by Urtzi, Cristobal, really asking these crucial questions to Dr. Thomas Lodi, who is so successful and working with patients who've basically been given up by the conventional system and also had already tried other complementary ways of healing. And I'm curious what is actually happening, and that's something that Urtzi really made me think, with patients that don't heal. What are really the factors that lead to that point where patients really give up? Or what are the underlying factors that you might say that people bring with them into this life? Is there karma involved? And I know Dr. Lodi is a philosopher, he is a deep thinker, and he's not working just with techniques, not just working with methodology. He's really deeply connecting from his soul. And we have two people in Urtzi and in Dr. Thomas Lodi who really work on a soul level with people, on a spirit level, on a freeing level, on an educational level. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm still waiting to have Dr. Thomas Lodi respond. He just said, yes, okay, he's coming on. So we're just hanging in there. And Urtzi, would you like to say maybe anything in anticipation of waiting for Dr. Lodi to come on? Any thought on your work and your deeper questions? You mentioned you were really disenchanted with working in the hospice movement. You made this decision to leave there. What are your aspirations now to really change and to embrace now as a new task in your life?
This may come into it, Hans, but I was going to build up on a couple of things that you said. You said something like cancer is equated to a fatal illness, something like that. And then you said cancer is seen as a death sentence. And so I think there are a couple of things in there. That one is that cancer itself as an illness is something that we could do something about, and we could, by using different methods and so on. And this is what I'm really looking forward to hearing from Dr. Lodi and trying to see his perspective and how he approaches it. It may be that we may get healing, we may reverse the illness, we may prolong our life, and there are many things that we can do to continue to have a good quality life. However, regardless of whether you get healed or not, the mortality rate, it's still 100%. People are going.
Would you elaborate on that? That's a very big, challenging statement.
Well, it's not really. Everyone's going to die. The mortality rate is 100%.
I thought I was immortal. Well, I just had a hope I would live forever.
So from that perspective, regardless of whether you heal or you don't, we are all approaching our own death as well. And something that I have seen in that intersection between the illness and your death approaching, I have seen how unprepared we are, particularly sort of in this day and age, in this part of the world. I'm not sure what it may be like in the Amazon and so on, but in the first world, in the developed world, at least here in the UK, I can see how unprepared we are to face our own death.
I see. I like this take because I suppose even at my age, I'm not quite aware that upon me is this time, this moment where we'll pass the threshold. And I suppose in modern society, and just coming out of our biodynamic course today and yesterday, where we talked a lot about life and death and a lot of philosophical questions that came up, is in older cultures, they were really honoring and waiting to cross the threshold to the other side, because they realized that there's more freedom there, there's more liberty there, there's more spiritual enjoyment there than here on the earth. And we as modern people have become very attached to being in our physical body, being in our pleasures, being in our desires, being in our enjoyments, and forget that actually there's this a whole other part that you're talking about, and I'm sure Dr. Lodi will address also. There's actually that immortal part that we can't have here on earth. So you're saying really it's a matter of how do we in any case prepare for the threshold that we're going to pass one day sooner or later?
Yes. Yes, and of course, you know, I think what I have seen is that when people get really, really ill and they continue to deteriorate, and of course, working in palliative care, I haven't been working with curative patients. I've been working with palliative patients, so the death was pretty much sure, or a certain death. Then again, what I have seen is that there are so many unfinished issues, so many traumas from the past, so many conversations that haven't been had for fear of maybe upsetting each other, and so on. And so you end up sort of dealing with something that is from the outside quite obvious, and I imagine that for everybody in it also quite obvious, but at the same time sort of denying the obvious in order to pretend that what's happening is not happening.
Yeah.
And you know, many of the traditional medical interventions that I have seen are about getting the patients to live as close as they can to what's happening not being happening. So, you know, you take some phrases like quality of life and so on, the closer you get to not feeling ill and not being ill, so to speak, the better the quality of your life.
Yeah.
And then it's only when the symptoms creep in that the reminder that you're actually not here for very long sort of crop up as well.
Yes.
So that's you know, some of the things that I've been seeing, and again, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Dr. Lodi has to say about those things, and what his take on it is.
So, just catching up on that, and also what you said earlier, you know, unfinished business people have. Hey there, Dr. Thomas Lodi, welcome.
Hello.
Good to see
thank you very much.
Looking so much forward to introduce the two wonderful, outstanding souls to each other. Urtzi Cristobal, who is here with us tonight. We had a little chance to chat a little bit about his questions, his life experiences, and his amazing questions that he's going to pose to you. And Dr. Lodi, I don't want to say too much, just I've said already about you in the introduction before you came on, what an outstanding, remarkable individual you are, helping so many people in improving their lives. I let Urtzi jump in and you will get to know each other in the interview. Really want to thank you both for coming on tonight, early morning in Thailand, and offer your time, your spirit, your passion to the world, really, that we can spread the word and awaken people to the alternatives that we have, the complementary ways of dealing with life challenges and the big issues that some people have in their life. So I'll hand over right away to you. We have a limited recording on this Zoom call now. I would just suggest if you do have any open questions after the 30 minutes, that might limit our first Zoom call, I will dial in again. And if you, Thomas, would be so kind just to dial in again with the same number, and then we can continue to be on a second screen, okay?
Okay, right now?
No, now we are set. We're all set to carry on. But then we have about 30 minutes, and that's a bit short for an interview, I think. So we can dial in again and continue the interview on the second screen, okay? With the same link. Good. So I'll let you shoot ahead. Urtzi, would you like to take the seat,
of course,
the helm, and carry on?
Thank you, Hans, and hello, Dr. Lodi.
Hello.
Great privilege to have you on. Very excited to have you on. I wanted to sort of follow up on the interview that you had with Hans. Just to briefly introduce myself, I come from a psychology and psychotherapy background, and I have worked for a hospice for over a decade, and so I have done a lot of work with patients.
Excuse me, what did you say your background was?
So I come from a psychology and psychotherapy background.
I see, okay.
And I worked for a hospice for over a decade.
Right.
So I basically ended up managing the psychological services and spiritual care for a hospice. So I saw people with very advanced sort of cancers and life-limiting illnesses, and seeing basically having an intimate contact with the dying process and seeing people approach their death in a very conventional sort of medical setting. And I left that work about 6 months ago because of the constraints that I felt in a very medicalized environment, to want to take a little bit more of an alternative approach. So I wanted to ask you a few questions more along the lines of the psychology and the spiritual aspect of cancer and advanced disease, and wanting to get your take on that. But I also wanted to come back to a few things that I know you talked about with Hans that I wanted to pick up from to get a bit more clarity about certain things. If that's
Sure.
okay.
Absolutely.
Is that okay with you?
Sure, fine, perfect.
Good. Okay. So, I know that you said to Hans that you think that in terms of priority when eating, frequency comes first, volume comes second, and quality comes third. And you then explained quite a lot about the frequency, and my understanding is that you were talking about basically giving the body enough time to basically detox and get rid of the waste and so on, and not keeping putting things in your body. But I wonder whether you can say a bit more about the volume and the quality.
Sure, okay. Yeah, well, once again, frequency, there are several parts to digestion. It starts, orally, first of all, you're producing enzymes in saliva, and there's the mechanical aspect of it. It gets into your stomach, other things are done, and then in your duodenum, your jejunum, and your ileum, all three parts of the small intestines, there's different sort of processes going on, and then the colon. Right, and so imagine if you have this one, if your stomach is going and you've still got things going on in your small intestines and your large intestines, and basically you wear them out. That's a very simple concept to understand. Just you don't give it a chance to simply rest, and what happens is that the whole mechanism becomes less efficient. It's the nature of nature. But in terms of volume, when you think if you consider the fact that the gastrointestinal tract, the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, the cells that line it are connected to each other by what are known as tight junctions. And the tight junctions are there so that nothing that's in the lumen of this long 10-meter tube that we have, nothing that's in there will get through into the blood until it has been appropriately and properly processed. Right. So for example, even an a protein, which is a small protein, which has 3 amino acids, must be broken down to its constituent amino acids to be absorbed, right, and to be utilized. Two molecules sugar has to be broken down to a monoglyceride. Diglycerides don't work. So in other words, it has to be broken down into the appropriate molecular form to be absorbed and then to be utilized appropriately. But because nature is aware that part of nature is that won't always happen. There will be things that break those tight junctions. Now there are no tight junctions in your skin cells. There are no tight junctions on your heart cells. There are no tight junctions anywhere. This is a very unique place, okay, where it's forbidding leakage. Okay. Now the life cycle of the endothelial cells, of these cells, is 3 days, 72 hours. So new ones are replaced so there's a lot of wear and tear that goes on, and they're replaced every 72 hours. So when you eat a large volume, when you expand it too much, you break these tight junctions. So if you eat a large volume, you will do that. Now, if you've got frequency and volume, you've got major problems. But if you're just having volume, you ate once a day and you expanded it to the point where you broke these tight junctions. If you ate only once a day, and that means you had 23 hours between each meal, then you might have enough time to heal it. You'd probably be okay. You'd probably be okay if you could do that. Most people won't, especially if someone is used to eating large volumes of food. They won't be able to put that kind of distance between meals because they'll have and our addiction, by the way, is not really to the food as much as it is to the process. The chewing, the tasting, the smelling, it's kind of like if you talk to a cigarette smoker, it's not necessarily the cigarette, it's the act of taking it out and lighting it and whatever that is, so it's it's interesting. There's a lot of ritualistic things that go on into habits but in any case, that's what happens. So with the volume, you break these, and and then with the frequency, you don't allow repair. And so what ultimately winds up happening is that you basically have leakages. And so now molecules that are too large that cannot be processed get into the blood. Or things that would normally not have been allowed at all, such as bacterial products and other things that would not have been allowed that have escaped into the blood are getting into the blood. Now, when they get into the blood, this is interesting. This is the origin of and the pathophysiology behind what are known as food allergies. We don't have allergies. Nobody has allergies to cucumbers and tomatoes. These are natural human foods. What happens is that, and that's why if you've ever known anyone who has quote food allergies, then you'll find out unquote. Then you'll find out that what they do is they put them on a rotating diet. Why do they put them on a rotating diet? Because whatever they're eating now, once it starts getting absorbed, whatever it is, it will be getting absorbed in too large of a molecular form. It will cause a reaction, so they'll have to switch it to another one. So it's not like they keep getting. In other words, heal the gut, and there's no more food allergies. So it's just a misunderstanding of the whole food allergy thing.
Right. Okay. Very, very interesting. Thank you. So I'm assuming that then what you mean is that the ideally would be having a couple of meals a day, probably around 12 and around 5, 3 hours before you go to sleep. Not very large volume, good quality, fresh, organic, and so on.
Right.
Okay, good. And I believe, are you advocating for a raw vegan diet?
Yes, but not. It realistically, there's a couple reasons why not. Realistically, no one will do it. The very rare individual will do it, and they're rare. They're rare, and if you see them, if they happen to make it through that, and they get into like above 5, 10, 20 years. They're magnificent people. I mean, there's a woman I've seen. I think she's 70 something. She looks like she's 35. It's just amazing. But it's not necessary. And the other thing is I do not think. But anyway, we're talking about raw vegan. And one of the things is I always try to avoid with people is to use terms that prevent them from thinking. And so colloquialisms and terms, once we hear a term, we no longer are actively aware. Let me see if I can explain this. For example, raw vegan. Now I have a concept of raw vegan. Now I put that on on a shelf in my mind, and it's no longer sitting there requiring my awareness and my participation. I've categorized it. It's in that category. So what I call it, what I like to call it is, even though I have to use that word to get people introduced to it, but I just call it real food. Real food. Because when I hear the word raw, I think of something painful. you know, if I'm overweight and I'm walking and my thighs are brushing together, within a while I'll have a rash and it'll be raw. You know, so the raw is not so good.
No.
The raw truth sounds terrible, you know, like, so let's just call it real food because it's produced by the earth for its creature, and you know, and unprocessed. But anyway, we've grown up with, unfortunately, eating this way. So most of us, 99.9% of us, will feel deprived and all other sorts of emotional problems if we are not eating some cooked food. And it turns out you can have a nice, long, healthy life with it. You know, look at the Hunzas. The Hunzas cook food, and they're up to 130s and 140s. The other thing is, I'm not sure that humans have to be vegan. I don't think any primate is. And there's a question of whether or not we're primates. Also, I mean, you know, and the reason I question whether or not we're primates, and I'll just drop this real quickly, is that all primates have 48 chromosomes, and humans have 46.
Right.
Number 2 and 3 is fused somehow. But anyway, so that separates us somehow on a very fundamental level from other primates. But other than that, we're pretty much kind of like the gorillas and the chimps and all that. And none of them are really vegan. They have a little bit of animal products. And at the minimum, I would say, is that they eat insects while they're cleaning, you know, in this social grooming that they have. They might be eating insects. So, and I've seen very, very healthy people in Okinawa who are eating fish. You know, so I don't know that we have to be vegan. I think vegan is more of a moral situation. It's kind of like in India, there's a situation, there's a concept called ahimsa, means living your life without causing harm. You know, it's, yeah. And so I see veganism as actually that. Vegetarianism, the not eating of flesh, I think also is a moral situation. And I think that eventually all humans will be that way eventually. I think we'll look back on these days as being, you know, barbaric.
It's more of a position you take in life rather than a diet.
Right. But you could still live a long, healthy life and eat a little bit of, but not a lot. Now, I wouldn't, for sure, you can never eat dairy. You can't. I mean, after you're weaned, you can never eat dairy, and you shouldn't eat any animals. Other animals. I mean, fish. You can get away with it. You can also get away with smoking. But I mean, you know, it's just not in your best interest. So, but that being said, I'm saying that people who wind up eating maybe 5 to 10% of their diet of being some sort of fish and perhaps an egg or so and some cooked are going to still be fine. But so if you have a crisis, if you have cancer, if you've had a stroke, if you have a severe crippling arthritis, if you've got something like that, even if you're extremely depressed, anything like that, if you can go through a period of cleansing and then eating 100% raw, healthy vegan food until the time that you're no longer that way. It might be 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever it is, and then you switch to an 80-20. What we find is that you're able to get across that bridge, right? And then you learn to eat. You learn to fast periodically. You learn to leave one day out a week where you don't eat. You learn to every quarter, every change of season, you give 7 to 10 to 14 days of a cleanse, of a fasting. You keep your colon clean. You have to keep your colon. You do all those things, and then it won't reaccumulate. You won't need to do any prolonged fasting again. If you have a severe problem, a stage 3, stage 4 cancer, then under supervision, you can do a long 40-day fast, 41-day, which we help people do. And lo and behold, they have clean PET scans, etc. So, you know, there's.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. So I was also thinking about, you know, based on your interview with Hans, you were talking about cells in cancer pretty much sort of getting worn out and not being able to produce as much energy and so on, and the importance of sleep to be able to remove those really worn out mitochondria and so on. I also wonder what you think about sort of pH and what the role of pH is. I mean, there are people out there who talk about, you've got people like Dr. Bernardo Mayalka and other people sort of talking about the fact that cancer is an acidosis attack and so on, or a crisis, and people talking about cancer being unable to grow in a pH higher than 7.2 or 4 or something like that, I think it is, and so on. So I wondered what you think about pH and what the role of it is in cancer.
Well, the mitochondrial issue happens with every healthy cell on a daily basis. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you feel full of energy, then your mitochondria are quite efficient because they're brand new. Every glucose, one glucose plus 6 oxygens produce 36 to 38 ATP. Very efficient energy producing mechanism. By midday, by the end of the day, by 6 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., those mitochondria might be producing, instead of 36 to 38, they might be producing 26 to 28, which is why you feel fatigued. Anyway, you go to sleep and you're not eating, and since the body does still need, every cell still needs approximately 1 billion ATP, what it does is it starts looking for things to grab the glucose out of it. So there's a system called the lysosomal system inside the cell, which are little lysosomes. They start dissolving the old worn out mitochondria and using the glucose and using the other carbon background to feed into the Krebs cycle, and they get their energy this way. So it's kind of it's a beautiful mechanism. It also it recycles bacteria, intracellular bacteria, viral particles, any old ribosomes, all the old machinery inside the cell that's been worn out from the wear and tear of life gets recycled. And the beautiful thing about mitochondria is that they have their own DNA. So they're immediately, once you recycle one, it immediately, you have a new one. You have two. So by morning, you're plush with all these brand new mitochondria. You jump out of bed. Now that's what happens. When 40 to 60% of these become damaged on a permanent basis for whatever variety of reasons that you have that conspire to wind up with the 40 to 60% mitochondrial defect deficiency, you wind up with a cell that now needs to ferment in order to make energy. A very inefficient mechanism, however, it does produce energy. And the problem is it makes 19 times less energy, so you therefore need 19 times more glucose. And so that feeds it in, because every glucose molecule only makes 2 ATP when you ferment it. So 2 times 19 is 38. So now you need to get 19 times more fuel to keep the energy going. That's why we do PET scans with cancer. We inject fluorodeoxyglucose. That's why cancer is said to feed on sugar. Unless you talk to an allopathic MD who will tell you, doesn't matter what you eat.
Of course.
Doesn't matter what you eat. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you smoke either, I guess, right? Anyway, they're really, those are the ones who need the true psychiatric services, are the guys running the show.
The amount of people I've seen on chocolate and Coke on the deathbed is just amazing.
It's incredible. So, so the mitochondria. So anyway, that's what happens. Now, when we look at pH, pH is a very interesting concept. And I won't go into how deep it goes, but suffice it to say that the pH of the extracellular fluid, that is the fluid that surrounds the cells, needs to be at an average of 7.4, anywhere from 7.35 to 7.45. Now that is also the pH of the arterial blood, the blood leaving the heart, going into the small arterioles, going into the capillaries, feeding the cells. Okay, and then the venules take away the blood. The pH goes a little bit lower, but it's still in that range, 7.35 to 45. But the average goes down a little bit into the vein. So in the vasculature, you need to have that. The fluid surrounding the cells, you need to have that. But that's it. Every other compartment of the body has different pH requirements. For example, the stomach needs to have a pH of about 1 to 2. You need to have a very, very acidic situation. In the first part of the duodenum, you need to have a pH of around 8, really high alkalinity. In the distal part of the small intestines, you need to have 6.8. In the colon, you need to have about 6. Now these are extremely acidic conditions. But that's what's necessary. That's why we have bacteria called acidophilus. Acidophilus produce acid, and what they do is they keep away the harmful or pathogenic bacteria. So in other words, each compartment of so when we say we have to be alkaline, what we need to understand is what needs to be alkaline is only the extracellular fluid and the arterial, and the intravascular system. But each compartment in the body has different pH requirements depending on its physiology and biology. So, so not everything needs to be alkaline, indeed. So,
so my understanding is that those people would measure pH either in the saliva or in the urine.
I'm sorry?
My understanding.
Oh, measure it in their urine.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's that's not helpful, because your urine is one of the jobs of your kidneys is to remove excess acid. So you're going to find acid in there. You're going to find acid in your saliva. The real pH test would be your blood, and that's not really hard to do either. You just like you do a finger glucose stick, you can do that and get a pH, and you can find out at least that's your venous blood. It's your vein, not your artery, but it's close enough. Now regarding a tumor, because the tumor is now fermenting, it's no longer able to go through the process known as oxidative phosphorylation in the mitochondria. It's fermenting. The end product is lactic acid. So tumors produce lactic acid, and so that's why the environment around them is acidic, and it's kind of like this wall of acid actually kind of immobilizes the cells adjacent to it, and as they become more acidic, they become vulnerable to becoming cancer. So it can kind of spread in that way. So the acid, the acidity is very, very difficult to combat. Even if you give intravenous bicarbonate and the person's doing 100% fresh green juice feast, okay, it's still hard to get the tumor itself acidic. Alkaline. You might get the rest of the body alkaline, but it's producing acid, so it's very, very difficult. It can be done, and what we do with people, if you put someone on a prolonged water fast, you remove the only two fuel sources that cancer has. Cancer can eat or ferment glutamine, which is an amino acid, and glucose. Okay, so on a water fast, you remove both of those, so you in effect starve the cancer. It dies. So that's why it kills all cancers. You give 40. If you've got enough fat around your organs and all that to survive this long a time, cancer will die. It just has the fuel. So anyway, I have been working with a professor in Germany, where and he's kind of a genius, come up with a substance, a very natural substance that we can infuse into the vein. It's attracted to areas of inflammation in the body, and when it gets there, it alkalinizes them. So we can actually alkalinize the tumor bed specifically. And the good thing about that is that the immune system, when it's fighting cancer, like the activated T cells, the natural killer cells, they cannot penetrate a wall that has a pH of less than 7.0. So something that's very acidic, and that's why you see people with cancer, you get to the point where you can't, no matter what you do, even the chemotherapy that they're giving them will not penetrate that wall of acid. So if you can just simply alkalinize the tumor bed, then everything you do will get in there and work. It's a very interesting protective mechanism that the cancer has. It's one of the many that it has. But anyway, we've kind of found a way around that. But yes, that's the pH story. That's the pH story.
Great, thank you. And so, yeah, those are the questions I wanted to ask you about sort of nutrition and the physical aspect. I also wanted to ask you other questions about the more kind of psychological, spiritual nature of it, because I know that you underwent, you got into spirituality quite early on in your life, in your teens, and as a youngster, and then I know you went traveling and so on, and then you ended up choosing to study psychology, and you became a clinical psychologist. Before then, you went into medicine. So I know there are some people out there. There are people like Dirk Gerd-Hammer, founder of the Germanic New Medicine. There are some other people out there who talk about cancer purely, and actually solely, I think, as as a reaction to some psychological problem and trauma and so on. I probably wouldn't go as far, but I have certainly been able to see that most people who I have treated would have had some trauma and some unresolved issues and a lot of things going on psychologically. So I wanted to know what your take is on that.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very important issue and point. You know what's no one's ever done is you take, let's say you took, okay, well, for example, the worldwide statistics now are 1 out of 6 people alive on planet Earth today will die from cancer. So that's pretty.
Will die from it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I've seen it both ways. I've seen we'll die from it, and we'll get it within their lifetime. We'll get it. But anyway, 1 out of 6. So in the U.S., it's 1 out of 2 men, 1 out of 3 women. In Europe, I think it's up to 1 out of 4. It's pretty amazing. It's a pandemic that the world has never seen. So let's say you get a group of 100 people in the room, right? Then you would say that you would know that a certain percentage of them would have cancer, and then the other percentage wouldn't, or at least not diagnosed at this point, right?
Yes.
And if you were to do some in-depth psychological and interviewing with them, which ones would not have had trauma in the last couple of years? In other words, I don't think this is exclusive to cancer. Yes, when we're talking to someone with cancer, we're going to find, yes, it seems that about 2 years prior to the cancer, some event occurred, blah, 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 blah. But here you don't have cancer, and what happened to you about 2 years ago? In other words, I don't think it's absolutely required for cancer to happen. In other words, because I see it in people that don't have cancer. I mean, how many people do you know have trauma?
Of course.
And I see people with severe problems, right? They grow up having been physically abused, sexually abused, and then they're no cancer, and they've had some severe trauma. So in other words, just because you've had that doesn't mean it's it. That's why I don't go along with that it's purely that. You have to understand, because I can also go take a vacation at Fukushima. I could be a Buddhist monk. I could be in a pure state of samadhi and go hang out at Fukushima and still get cancer. So what we have to understand, I think it's very important for us to understand, is that when we talk about mind, body, and spirit, and we separate these things as if they're entities, we have to understand this is about as a true an understanding. Whoop, the meeting has been upgraded by the host and now includes unlimited minutes. Interesting. We have to understand that just as Freud talked about the id, ego, and superego, those are not separate things that exist within the mind. Those are just areas. It gives him a way to discuss the mechanisms of the mind, how the mind works. But it's not that, okay, here's the id, and then if you just turn right over here, you'll find the ego, and then behind them all is. It's not that way. And the same with the body. Where does the spirit end and the mind begin, and where does the mind, is this the hypothalamus? Hypothalamus is where the body meets the mind. And anyway, what we need to understand is that the human being is a very complex entity with these 3 sort of aspects to it. We're rooted in the spiritual world and rooted in the physical world. And then when you get down to the physics of reality, what's the difference between energy and matter? Nothing, except maybe speed. When you get down to physics, right? E equals mc squared. This cup becomes energy at a certain speed. So anyway, when you get down to it all, it's all incomprehensible anyway. But the point is this: when we have an illness, which is an unbalance, it's an imbalance. That's all it is. We have to understand that what we call disease is the body compensating. It's a homeostatic corrective response to maintain functional integrity. So this compensation, this whole process occurs throughout the whole being, and the whole being is mind, body, spirit. That's what it is. So unless we heal that part, unless we understand that part, what we find is that the person goes back to habits, goes back to, and when we, for example, the biology of stress. What happens in the biology of stress? Well, you shut off the parasympathetic system, you shut on the sympathetic system. You're producing cortisol, you're producing epinephrine, you're no longer producing serotonin, it goes on and on and on, and your biochemistry changes by just your thinking, etc. So anyway, so if you don't heal on all levels, you won't heal, which is why in our center here, we have a fellow who is he actually lived with the Dalai Lama for 15 years. He's an ordained monk he's from England originally. Ordained monk in both Tibet and Thailand, and he's able to work with people and help them come to this place of peace. And so if I were to talk about what needs to happen psychologically and spiritually to someone with cancer, it's something that can easily be misunderstood, that there needs to be a surrender, and surrender does not mean giving up. It means accepting what is. Mm-hmm. Just accepting what is. Just like if you're an alcoholic, until you accept that you're an alcoholic, it won't change. And so, and it's raining outside. You can be angry, you can be sad, you can be melancholy. It's still raining outside. So in other words, it's not until acceptance happens, and this acceptance or surrender is what initiates healing. It initiates healing, and we see that with and one of the beauties of cancer that I like. One of the reasons I love working with people who have cancer is it's the one condition that I've found on earth where people finally stop negotiating. You have heart disease, they're going to say, well, can't I just do this? What about on weekends? But with cancer, they go, okay, stand on my head for 8 hours here, and then what? For the most part. But now, once they start feeling better, it's interesting. We put them, they come in willing to do anything. And then they start feeling better because they're doing cleansing, etc. And now they start negotiating again. It's amazing. So one of the amazing conclusions I've come to is that humanity's best friends are pain and suffering. They're the only things that will allow us to turn right. Right, we're heading off the cliff there. You tell a 16-year-old kid, hey, smoking cigarettes and drinking beer and eating pizza and staying up all night is not good. And he goes, I feel great. What are you talking about? So it's not until he doesn't feel great that he's going to do it. So anyway, anyway, so that's the delicate, the delicate line that I walk with people with cancer, is to remind them. And so one of the tools that we have is a video diary. It's a video diary once a week, just to see how you doing, checking in once a week of 5 minutes, so that they can watch and they can go back and say, oh yeah,
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting, and I was also sort of seeing some of the differences in my experience, because I work with a different population, I think, because I work with people in a very medical setting, and so what I have observed is that I would sort of say there are two different sort of alternating stages when people negotiate. One is when they are having active treatment, and the other one is when they are told that nothing works or it didn't work. And so when they are having active treatment, there is a franticness where people are trying to do everything they can. They are kind of thinking, because they are full of hope, they are thinking that they may live for a long time, and maybe it will work, and then it will give them enough time for the next one, and then enough time for the next one, and so on. And then what I notice is that when they are told that it didn't work and they can't do anything for them, and all the hope is gone, that's when they stop negotiating. And their priorities change. Their priorities are no longer what they used to be. Their priorities now are about spending time with family, about observing beauty, about being in the moment, and everything else. But then at some point, somebody will suggest a trial or something, or some alternative chemo or whatever it is. And again, they go back and they completely forget about working with what is. They are now thinking about what could be, and so on. So my experience is slightly different in that. But it's really interesting when you talk about your own experience, because I again agree. There are people who will basically be ready to do almost anything in those circumstances. So yeah, that's interesting.
Well,
Thank you.
When I find that people 100% surrender, and then with gratitude,
yes,
say, wow, I get to live. I'm going to eat this food, and this food is really, wow, you know, that whole, once that happens, they're done. And there's something which I call faith. And faith, I'd like everyone to remove that from whatever religious definition you have of it. Faith is when you know what's going to happen, and it hasn't happened yet. It's not a belief. And the distinction I always make is that you can believe in Santa Claus, but you don't believe in oceans. You know, you either know about oceans or you don't. But Santa Claus, you believe or you don't. So if something is real, you know it or you don't know it. If it's not real, you can believe it or not believe it. So just as if you slice your finger while cutting an apple tonight, you don't believe it's going to heal. You know it's going to heal. Well, when you have that same knowledge about the cancer, you don't even need to come to our center. And I'll give you an example. I had a woman told she had 3 weeks to live. She was brought in on a gurney. She had oxygen on. She grabbed my arm when I walked up to her bed, to her gurney, in the middle of our clinic. She just got there. And she said, thank God, now I know I'm going to make it. 8 weeks later, jogging to the clinic. 8 years later, a postcard from Paris on vacation. So, I mean, now what's the difference between her and the lady next to her with a lesser cancer? She knew. It wasn't, oh, God, now I hope I can do well. It was, I'm done. And she's done. So, you know, and I've had that before. I had another woman. It was just incredible. 2001 was a woman we had our talk. I always give people the talk. There's a special talk. And then she goes, okay, I don't even need the vitamin C IV. I don't need anything. I'm just going to do what you said about eating and dieting and meditation and yoga and cleansing and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, listen, stop in once a month so I can see how you're doing, you know? She goes, okay. So she did once, and this was June of 2001. So July she came, and she's getting better and better, more and more energy. She could move her arm now. It was all full of lymph nodes, matted lymph nodes. In January, 6 months later, she had a fatal automobile accident. They did an autopsy, and there was no cancer.
Wow.
So, I mean, you know, and I've seen this over and over again. It's when you know, which is faith. Faith is not believing. Okay, you can't, because belief implies doubt. So it's not, So if you believe something, that means there is a possibility that it's not true. And so anyway, but when you know it, it's done. Anyway, that's where I always see my job in terms of spiritual counseling. And how do you bridge fear to faith? And the answer is knowledge. You know, and that's what I do. I need to give them knowledge, and I teach them the miracle of this body. And once they realize the miracle, I said, of course it can heal. I mean, you're making 2 million new cells every second. Cut it, it heals. I mean, you scratch a Mercedes, it's not going to heal. You scratch this, it heals. Blah, 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 blah. And then I teach them, and I have what's called the school of life. And that knowledge helps being with somebody who's centered. And gives them anyway. It's quite a journey. The journey from cancer to non-cancer, and I'd say the vast majority of the journey is non-physical.
Yeah, because thank you. That's important for me to hear, because I think what I understood from what you said is that with acceptance or surrender, however you want to call it, you actually open the doorway to a really spiritual experience of being fully present. Being fully present in the moment and being grateful for the miracle of just being alive in that moment. Absolutely. It's like as though the whole universe is just working for you to have that experience in that moment. And there is no separation between you and the other. It's all one, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that in itself is completely satisfying.
Yes.
And you're not in want.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. You are whole. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and are you saying that faith is a choice?
Well, if we get philosophical, I'm probably of the 0.000000001% of the population of planet Earth that thinks we have no choice about anything. So we can't go there with me. You can't go there with me, because I think that even if I decide to make, like, for example, if I made a choice, right, then my question becomes, well, where did that thought come from? Did you decide to think it? No, it happened. It happened just like your heart's beating. We don't. Every thought, as far as I'm concerned, every thought is an epiphany. Thinking is an involuntary process. You don't decide to think, otherwise you'd spend all day today planning your thoughts tomorrow. Anyway, thinking happens, heart beats. Right now I'm not busy digesting. My body's digesting. I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing. We're human beings, not human doings. But we're confused because our language lies. Our language says, I'm going to drive the car. I'm going to your house. Intention. All this, that's how our language is. It lies. We don't even know what we're going to say until it opens our mouth. And then we look at somebody like a wealthy person who's owns several companies, and we'll say, this guy's really in control of his life. He knows what he's doing. Whereas this guy over here who's pushing a cart, we control, and if you got down to them, what did Socrates do? Socrates wanted to find the smartest person on earth. So he went to the Oracle of Delphi and he said, please tell me who's the smartest person on earth. And the Oracle said, it is you, Socrates. And he said, wait a minute. That's impossible because I don't know anything. I'm sorry, it's you. So Socrates spent his whole life trying to find someone to prove the Oracle wrong and to find someone that he could learn from. So the whole process of dialectics that evolved out of that process was him asking somebody in a very pure way what they knew. And in the end, everybody, the most learned educator, the most learned whatever, in the end had to say, I don't know. Because behind every assumption is an assumption until you get to the point where I don't know. And so he was put to death. That's a no. You don't mind the PhDs that they don't know anything. But anyway, so that's where I come from. So do I think faith is the choice? No, I think it's a blessing. I think it's ordained. But I think everything is, so we can't go there with me. And I don't know how to think the way other people think, so I can't really answer that question. Because I don't know how it would be if I thought we had choices versus not having choices. I don't know how that would be. Because I know we don't have any choice. So
we could have a 2-day conversation on this. So what makes the difference between those who heal and don't?
Those who what? Those who heal
and don't. Because I think if I'm kind of linking it with choice, I'm not sure whether when you talk about the fact that we don't have a choice, whether this is karmically driven or how, but to some extent, some people heal and some people don't. And what is it? They must be making some choices, or at least following certain thoughts that emerge from wherever they emerge. But there must be a difference. What's the difference?
Right. It's a very, very very good question. I don't know the difference. It's interesting though. During the first interview with someone, I usually Skype with people before they come, and that doesn't work. That just kind of we meet each other. I give them a plan, and then they come. But once we're finally face to face, and I feel them, and they feel me, I can tell you at that point. Although I don't ever try to even settle on that thought. But in retrospect, I can say I knew. I have a feeling, and it's, I don't know. Because see, first of all, if you change your perspective and understand that, wait a minute, is it true that living is good and death is bad? Is that true? Is that what we must think? That living at any cost is more important than dying? Because that's assuming that behind the veil of death is nothing or bad or something like that. Well, what if it's just a doorway to another existence, and that you only needed to be here 5 years this time? or whatever it is, and now you get to go. We have no idea, but the major assumption there with death and all that sort of thing is that dying is bad and that living is good, right? So if we could
not only that, also that the journey there, the journey until your death, is also a meaningless one, when in fact it could be a meaningful, satisfying one.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because I was talking to Hans earlier on. I was saying, regardless of all the advancements in medical science and what have you, we can treat illnesses, we can prolong life and whatever, but the mortality rate is still 100%. Everyone is going to die.
Right.
And one of the most heartbreaking things that I have witnessed is the meaninglessness that the people that I have worked with, because of the treatment method they have chosen, the meaninglessness that they live with on their journey into death, and all the fear and terror. Actually, terror is the right word. The terror that goes with it, and all the trauma and everything, which is unnecessary, I would say, and also is not universal. Not every culture has got this terror to death.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Yeah. And so who is it that heals? And, I would have to say for the most part, it's the ones, if I were to look back on it, and I've never really, sat down and carefully looked at it, but my general feeling are those who did surrender to it and accept it and look at the journey as an opportunity, like this is a beautiful, wonderful opportunity to change my life. In fact, they even become evangelical. They start preaching this new way of life and everything. And that is a way of life that is in harmony with nature, a way of life that is where your shoes are off and your feet are on the ground, and, back to earth and sleeping at sunset, and, back to these, those are the people in general. But then again, there are people. I've had other people who say, but my grandmother, and then I meet the grandmother had surgery, radiation, and it's gone. And it's been gone 20 years. And she's the same old, so again, there's a percentage of that we have to always, which I call the karma percentage. It's 1%. But that 1% is everything, because if 24% of the population gets this and 36% of the population gets this and but I get it, it's 100%. So statistics become irrelevant if I have it, because now it's 100%, right? So there's 1% of the whole program is karma, or we call it maybe destiny, providence, the will of God, however you want to call it, and that trumps everything. Unfortunately, we can't use that word anymore. Why didn't he have a different name? But anyway, we got to come up with a new word for Trump. But that trumps everything, because you're right. But I would say for the vast majority of the people that surrender, accept, and go this way with gratitude. But that's not 100% true. What has been your experience?
Well, I haven't really worked with that many people who've healed, because I worked in the palliative care sort of sector. So pretty much most of the people that I worked with died. What I could see is, again, I worked in that intersection where illness equated death, and then people ended up dying. All of my patients that I work with died. When I work with family members and then bereavement work, that's different. But what I found is there's been a lot of meaninglessness and a lot of, even those people who hoped for a cure were hoping that they would get better so that they could go back to their old life and do exactly the same thing. Like they could enjoy their barbecues and smoking cigarettes and doing this and doing that. And what seems to be missing is a purpose in life. And those people who didn't heal from cancer, but kind of healed from something else, are the people who really gave themselves into the process, into the journey towards death. So they were committed. They were committed, like a warrior who knows that the battle is lost, but they still go. They still go with their head high. And so those people found a project somewhere. They found a project where they were going to be kind to themselves. Or some people found a project in telling their 8-year-old child how life is and giving them some advice, or maybe recording some videos or doing whatever they needed to do to pass it on. Some people who gave their whole life to work in the city and make a lot of money and become really important in their jobs and careers and so on, realize right at the end that they have missed the most important things with the family, and they wanted to kind of make up for the lost time and so on. And those people really died not just peacefully, because everybody who's sedated dies peacefully, so to speak, but they died they had a full experience of death. And the thing with dying is that it's not, you know, like both in the physical world as well, everything that dies decomposes and creates the nutrients for the next lots of life to come out. And so in the dying process, in kind of decomposing the whole psychology and the relationships and the meaning of life and everything else, they fed all the memories and all the things that people were going to be living with for the rest of their lives. And it makes a big difference, you know, as a family member, when you are left with resentment and unfinished business and all those things, or when you're left with gratitude and good memories, really. So I haven't really seen people heal physically from their illness, but there was that sort of transformation, that sort of surrendering, actually, surrender and commitment.
Yes, and you know, I'm sure you've heard of Richard Alpert, who became Ram Dass.
Yes.
Yeah. Ram Dass, prior to his stroke, would go die with people. He, would just sit with them on the last whether it was a month or 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or 5 days, whatever it was, and he would die with people. And he actually went through it with them consciously, sat down, would lie down next to them, and die with them. So he went through this many times, to help them go through the transition. And it's very interesting. I look at that, and I look at also, like, for example, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and they talk about Bardo as being this place that happens right after death. It's a journey that we have to make. So really, it really depends on your view of death, or your understanding of death, not your view of it, your understanding of death. If you've been able to see, now I've read those books and all that, so my view of it is, that's why I don't have the same emotion associated with death that many people do have. And I've had my mother die, I've had my father die, I've been through the emotion of it. But my emotion is not the same with it. I don't see it as the end at all. It's just the doorway. And so having that perspective is so different. My God, if I thought it was something else, I would be terrified like the rest of the world. So to me, it's not such a bad alternative. And in fact, I'm sure you've seen the suffering. It's a much better alternative, even if there were nothing better, because I've seen people in such agonizing situations, even if it's better. But yeah, it's interesting. Who's going to survive? So maybe the answer is not, can we get you to live X number of days longer, but can we get you to be totally present and content in the last 8 moments of life, you know? Because one thing I do remind everybody, when we're sitting in a room and we've got all the relatives, and I said, none of us have a contract for tomorrow. None of us. You know, we're all here today by the grace of God, or however you look at it, and we're here tomorrow by that same process. I don't know if I'm going to be back tomorrow. My assumption when I leave today is that I'm going to go home, sleep, and be back tomorrow. I may not. So we all have the same prognosis. So that's the thing. And if we understand that, then what's important? Important. How am I living right now? You know, and I know in my second to the last breath on life of life, I know that I'm going to say I blew it. I wasn't there. I wasn't present for 98% of my life. I was too busy, and what could be, should be, might be, could have been, should have been, will and was, and if and maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, which makes, you know, an interesting sort of conclusion is that, you know, cancer or death in itself is not a medical problem; it's a cultural problem. It's how we approach it in a culture.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have the culture to support healing and dying meaningfully.
You're absolutely right. It is a cultural problem. It's not a medical problem. And neither is birth. You know, birth. I don't think birth should happen in hospitals, and I don't think death should happen in hospitals.
Of course. I want to ask you a last question before we wrap up, because I'm just aware that, you know, we've been going on for over an hour, and so I'm sure you've got things to do and so on. So I wanted to ask you, what happens to those people who don't heal? I mean, I don't know what your success rate is with healing, but what happens with those who don't heal?
You know, the unfortunate thing in my situation is that people come from all over the world, so I don't always get a chance to follow up with them. If they usually leave, and then I never, you know, sometimes I reach out to them and I don't get a response, or I don't know. But there are many. I would say the vast majority I've never heard back from. So that's, you know, just because, you know, even when I was in Arizona, they came from all over I had very few patients locally. And now here in Thailand, I have very few Thai patients. Most of my patients are people from the Middle East, Australia, Europe, you know, so I don't know. You know, that's the sad thing. I don't know. And I don't know what happens to them, but I'd like to know. In fact, what we're in the process of developing is because here's the problem. Regardless of the three things that I want people to have when they come here. Number one is to change their database. I want to eliminate the myth of disease from their mind, and et cetera. Blah, blah, blah. Change their database. Number two, give them the skills to live a healthy life, which are habits and also food preparation, et cetera. And then number three, the experience of feeling somewhat healthy, which you get from fasting and the cleanse. Because if you don't have that experience, then these other two things are just theory. So if you can have all three of those, and then you leave with some new habits, a new knowledge, and experience to drive you, then there's a good chance you might do it again. However, I mean, you might continue it. But life being what it is, you're going to go back to a family, to a society, to a condition that thinks that's all nonsense. That's, you know, and so you're going to change. So what we have found is, because I found, for example, what people always understand is smoking. You know, how long should I quit smoking for?
Yeah.
Well, as long as you want to breathe, you know. But anyway, so how long do I have to eat this way? That's what kind of question is that? That means if you're asking that question, we're in trouble, right? But anyway, so what we want to do is to be able to have people, when they come in, join sort of a web-based group, so that as they leave, we have an ongoing relationship where we're talking about new recipes and blah 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 blah, and, you know, and we need to follow it through, because and that's why I require, as part of the program of staying alive, is, you know, number one, you got to go to bed early, you got to wake up, you got to meditate, read, and then exercise. But the reason reading is so important, and without it you won't sleep, is that may be the only 10-15 minutes of the day where you get the truth. The rest of the day, friends, society, advertising, the whole thing is the lie that you can, you know, eat cheeseburgers, be buff, and be a celebrity, and, you know, madness, right? The only 20 minutes a day. So you need that input of reality, of truth. So that's why, and I say, you don't just read anything. You know, it's not reading a novel. It's not reading, you know, Time magazine. What you're reading is books on healing and health and things like that. And that's what I tell people, or spiritual books if you're. But you need to read about healing and health and understand that the body miraculously is doing what it's doing. And if you read that every day, and you've had a good night's sleep, and you've meditated, so you learn to keep the mind, you exercise the muscle to turn off the madness, and you exercise your body. If you do those things, you have a good chance of you have a better chance. Anyway, so I'm sorry I didn't answer your question really, but it's hard to answer because I don't see them.
No, that's fine. You don't see them, so you don't know. So basically, you don't know where some of those may have healed or some may have not. Yeah. You don't quite know. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I think I was thinking somehow that's the difficulty is that a person can come out of their natural environment, and they can come with you and they can do some healing and so on. Then they have to go back to the same toxic environment sometimes, and so that's a problem. Again, I know in my way of working, because I've worked a lot closer to death, really, with people who are dying. Then I still do a lot of work with families and the patients as well, because there are a lot of things unresolved that could be solved before it's too late. And so spending a couple of days with the family and the patients and so on allows them to have all those conversations, to ask for forgiveness, to say I love you, to heal anything that needs healing, and then they die. But I think in the way that you work, that you actually you work with them so that they can heal and so on, and then they go back to their countries or wherever it is, then you may not have what happened. You may not know what happens. So yeah, that's fine. You don't know. You don't know. Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, Thomas. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
And I think Hans is there somewhere in the background. Are you there, Hans?
I just am so elated by the wonderful concept that Thomas, you brought, and Urtzi, that the transitions into life, the transitions into the other life, afterlife, they're institutionalized. We need to bring culture back into them, freedom into them, caring and nurturing and meaning. That's really the biggest inspiration you brought for me. And then also that we create the community, that we follow up with people, that we really create that support system. And I mean, I have lots of new questions that I would love to pose to you, Thomas. Your whole nutrition program, your emphasis on new habits in terms of the lifestyle. But I'm sure we will meet up again soon. I really appreciate the time, both of you, and possibly we have more in-depth conversations about your whole philosophical and your whole inspirational psychology that you carry within you to inspire humanity. And please like this post when we post it on YouTube or on our new channels, which we're going to establish. And looking forward to see you again soon on this site. Thank you so much, and blessings to you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.